Hey everyone, ASF here, and today I'm here to talk about my progress in working on my dream RPG game. So, let me start by introducing myself a little bit. I started making pixel art and learning how to use Game Maker Studio 2 a little over a year ago, and I've pretty much learned everything I know through watching YouTube tutorials, Googling questions, and looking through the manual. Recently, I've started to crave more than just small projects and tutorial series, so I started brainstorming on a larger game project for myself. Now, I'm a huge fan of multiplayer games, but at the moment, that's just way past my level. So I went back to the genre that started my love for games, RPGs. As a kid growing up in the late 90s that was fortunate enough to have a Super Nintendo Entertainment System and later a Game Boy Color, I grew up playing some classic RPG games like Secret of Mana, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and the early Pokemon games. I played so much Pokemon that I had two copies of Yellow, and both of them got a good bit of play. So let's get into my game and what exactly it is I'm trying to make in the first place. My ideal RPG, what does it look like? Well, I had already made these goblin characters, so I wanted to make a game set in their universe and based on what kind of mischief these little guys get into. I like RPGs that are a bit more open and you can explore as you please, so I like to make the map and story in a way that doesn't really restrict the player, but still gives a helpful push in the right direction. I want melee focused combat that just feels good. I want the player to feel like they have the appropriate range and just tools in general to deal with the enemies and the bosses. Now, speaking of enemies, I want a good variety of them, and I want challenging and memorable boss fights. And last, but certainly not least, I want a humorous storyline and cast to go with it. There will be a storyline to engage the player, but I just don't want it to have a very serious tone. So we're not going to be rescuing any princesses, and we probably won't be saving the world either. So, I got to work. I got basic player movement and attacks going pretty quickly and recreated a nostalgic starting area. I had a little trouble picturing exactly how I wanted this goblin town to look, so I took some shortcuts and reused some familiar layouts just so I could get back to coding. I was more interested in laying the groundwork of the RPG, name work in progress, like basic enemy behaviors, items, some NPCs, and making some sort of complete gameplay loop. My basic idea for the loop was for the player to fight their way north to a new city and then conquer the nearby dungeon. After about a week of work, I decided that it would be a good idea to make some sort of shorter term deadline to release a demo. I thought this would be a good exercise in accountability, and I wanted to practice releasing something even if it's not perfect. Another month sounded like an appropriate amount of time to do a sort of progress report and see exactly how much I got done. My focus for the month was just to see how many things I could cross off the checklist, even if it meant it wasn't perfect or had some minor bugs. I'd have to just go back and fix them later. This approach let me get through most of the essentials and in a pretty short time span, but it left a lot to be desired in terms of polish and feel. For the sake of getting the demo out on time, I decided this was the sacrifice I needed to make. My time ended up breaking down like this. The first week I spent drawing and animating some basic sprites as well as coding the movement and basic attacks. The next few weeks I spent on enemies, new zones, all the different player behavior, and interacting with enemies and objects. I also made a few more surrounding zones like the city and the zone south of it. Then I got to work on what I wanted to be the core of the experience, the dungeon. I wanted to throw some new enemies and traps at the player that would give them a nice challenge at the end of the demo. I made some new enemies like these dungeon guards and dungeon knights as well as some traps for the player like the arrow traps and the spike pit. At this point, I had about a week left. The dungeon looked and felt okay, but it was missing an incredibly crucial part. You know, the boss, the whole reason we came here in the first place. I also wanted a mini boss that would drop a key for the door that blocks the player's way to the finish. For the boss, I made this large TV looking robot guy that tries to stomp on the player when he gets close. As for the mini boss, I made these dungeon fighters that have a spinning kick attack and drop a small key upon defeat. Then I had to make the key object and make it unlock the door. The bosses feel alright, but I'm not exactly happy with them in their current state. Revamping them will be a big part of my focus in the coming weeks, so like and subscribe for part 2. But I was running out of time, so I had to leave the bosses as they were. I had only a few days left, but I had a bunch of small gameplay and visual bugs that I needed to fix and polish the game up a bit. I also wanted to add some NPCs the player could talk to give the world a bit of flavor and not just have empty towns and zones full of killer pumpkins. This week was kind of frustrating with trying to fix up a bunch of issues and trying to make the bosses feel okay to fight against. I also had to tidy up some of the pixel art and adjust some of the rooms. But in this week, it really felt like the Goblin RPG came a long way. It might sound kind of strange, but it started to feel more like a game and not just an interactive coding project of mine. I released the demo. I got some of my friends to try it and listen to their feedback. One of my close friends even streamed himself play the game to me just so I could get real-time feedback as to what he thought. Shout out JXJ. The overall consensus seemed to be that it's a good start, but it needs a lot of work. Melee combat feels a little off, the levels are unfinished or not really polished, and the bosses aren't really memorable or satisfying to beat. But I'm happy now that I got a bunch of people to try it and that I got a few days to step back and see the project for what it had really become. I had been working on the RPG every day for over a month now, and everything had to be done before or after work, so it was really satisfying to see how far it came. I can't wait to continue to build the Goblin RPG and show my progress in more videos. Please like and subscribe to see more and to help me grow my channel. I'm ASF, and I thank you for watching.